This is Brother Mandus of the World Healing Crusade in Blackpool, England, and at this time I am in New York, which, as you know, is the home of the United Nations in their administration and world work, and I am talking now to a man with a dream, a man with a vision, who's been doing something which I think is very significant in the field of world peace, identified with the United Nations and with the world or global concept of peace. This man is John McConnell, and he initiated the movement called Minute for Peace. I want to introduce you to him and ask him to tell us something of his vision and how it is being implemented, and anything else he cares to comment about. This is John McConnell. So nice to have you here. Will you tell us something about this whole vision that you have?
Well, Brother Mandus, the idea back of Minute for Peace is to get people all over the world to take at least 1 minute, hopefully more, to think about peace or pray for peace, with a consciousness of being joined with other minds and spirits from all over the world, and to make peace terribly important. I feel that we must think about the methods and the techniques and the meanings of peace, and we must tune in on the highest we know to find the way that we can contribute to peace in the world. I believe that every man has a part to play, that his thought will make a difference.
Well, John, that's a marvelous concept. How did this come about? How was it first initiated? What gave you the idea about this?
I had been concerned for many years about the requirements for peace. It seemed so stupid that man would continue the ways of war when everybody wanted peace. It seemed to me that the missing ingredient was something in the psyche or spirit of man, and out of this was born the idea of Minute for Peace. I discussed this with people in radio and television back in San Francisco in 1963, and one of these was the vice president of an American network, CBS network. He thought this was a good idea and said he would like to do something about it. Well, 11 days after we met, President Kennedy was assassinated. I went back to him. Together we went to the mayor of San Francisco, and we ended the period of mourning officially in San Francisco with a Minute for Peace. This was on December 22nd, just 3 days before Christmas, and on all the radio stations and television stations there, and others picked it up in different parts of the world. There was a minute dedicated to peace. We gave the time around the world, and then we said that this is a time for us to dedicate our thoughts and actions to goodwill and peace. This was followed by interest from religious leaders and from statesmen in different parts of the world, and led to my coming to New York, where through, I believe, guidance and just wonderful openings that were provided by the Spirit, I was able to interest Secretary General Outhant of the United Nations in the idea of Minute for Peace. And in 1965, on the 20th anniversary of the United Nations, Secretary General Outhant issued a statement endorsing the idea of Minute for Peace and giving a thought for peace which captured the real heart of what we were trying to do. He spoke about peace beginning in the minds of men and urged that each person take at least a minute for thoughts of goodwill and peace. This was followed by recording of other leading world figures. I recorded Margaret Mead and Dr. Eric Fromm and leaders in the United Nations, Lord Caradon, Chief Adebo, many others. Then later on we recorded children at the United Nations school. And Brother Mandus, as you know, when you are open and in tune with the Spirit, it's just amazing what comes through little children. There were children 7 and 8 years old who expressed perhaps more effectively than the profound statements of these world leaders the meanings of peace. I remember one little 8-year-old girl. I asked her, well, now, how can we make peace work? And she said, well, peace starts with yourself, inside yourself. If you are happy, then with your friends you will be happy and will not fight. But if you are sad and argumentative, then with your friends you will just be mean and they won't like you. And then another boy, a young boy who said that we here at the United Nations School feel we are a family. This boy was an Arab boy, and his Minute for Peace is being broadcast right now on Radio Cairo in Arabic. Incidentally, UNICEF distributed the scripts of these Minute for Peace thoughts, and they've gone all over the world. I received letters from the people have heard this on the Norwegian network. It's been broadcast on the Australian network and All India Radio and on leading stations and several networks here in the United States. So we have a beginning right now of the spread of Minute for Peace. And I feel that here we have an opportunity to join in unity all over the world, in spite of our differences, because there's hardly anyone who doesn't, deep down inside of himself, believe in love and the power of love and the power of goodwill. And if we ask him in his own way to turn his thoughts to goodwill and peace, he can respond affirmatively. And if he does it, knowing that others are joining him all over the world, we'll create a climate in which the things that are needed for world peace will be done. I think there's no question about it that the answer to our global quest for peace is in each of us. And if each man will join in his own way in thinking about peace, in spreading the idea of Minute for Peace, getting others to join in Minute for Peace, and then accompanying this with works and deeds of peace, finding some place where his time and where his effort can contribute to international understanding and cooperation, to the things that make for peace. We will get so excited about this new world that is a-borning that everyone can joyfully put his shoulder to the wheel to bring the kingdom of God into realization all over the world.
Well, that certainly is a wonderful concept. And of course, what I admire so much about the entire project is that obviously we turn to the Father, we let the Spirit of God come in and flow through this extended consciousness of people expressing this goodwill in prayer in these Minutes for Peace the world over, so one can see the movement of the Spirit taking hold and multiplying right across the world in that sense. And two, I've been very impressed, if I may say so, how mightily the Father has used you, just a simple, humble man, a dreamer, a man with a vision, without organization or finance or anything else. I frankly have marveled because, as you know, I've been with you in the United Nations. I've walked the corridors, met some of the delegates with you, sat in the delegates' lounge, sat in on the debates in General Council and so forth. And I've been tremendously impressed how just you, a simple man, have found entry into these higher states of world politics, if you like, able to talk to man representing the nations of the earth. And so this, too, it seems to me, is a sign of the movement of the Spirit that is central to all people. And I cannot help but know that to the degree of your perseverance and integrity and vision and prayer, this is something which must in itself multiply and bring more and more people into that central concept. The very fact that you have already found so many of the prominent leaders of the world being so closely with you and identified with this very concept of spending a minute for peace is, in that sense, almost a new factor in politics. You see what I mean?
Well, I believe right in the United Nations Security Council that the realization that were people joined in a thought for peace with goodwill, and that their consciousness was bringing into the room a new dimension. I feel this has contributed in several situations to more peaceful solutions to the problems facing the Council. And I again feel there is no limit to what can be done through individuals who will open themselves as channels for the Spirit, who will listen to their inner voice, and whatever is given to them, they will with a whole heart and with a loving heart, that they will carry out the work that is suggested or the deed that is suggested to them with real goodwill. I believe that peace is coming. It's in the air, and I think that each one of those who hear this broadcast can make a profound contribution to this coming world of beauty and peace. We can help speed the day when this will be realized, when we'll have no more fear of wars, and when the creative purposes of God will be realized in a new age of wonder and beauty.
Well, it's a great refreshment to the spirit to hear you say deep and wonderful words like that. Now, we were talking about this earlier, and I think you mentioned something about the grassroots idea of the movement, if I may put it like that. What exactly did you mean by that?
Well, we've planted a very simple idea in different places, in service clubs, churches, in communities, civic organizations, and in many places the idea has been picked up and is being expanded. For instance, I just received a report that the Lions Clubs in the state of California, this is a service club, that they're opening and closing all of their meetings with a minute for peace. What they do is to just briefly state what the idea of people all over the world joined in a thought for peace, and then they have a minute of silent meditation. That this is a time for thoughts of goodwill directed toward world peace.
And so you visualize this taking place in churches, in communities, groups, anyone who cares to take it up and follow it through.
Right. Anyone can do this, and they can get their friends to do it. And this is what makes it dynamic, is doing something that you believe in, that you feel it's important to you, then sharing it with a couple of friends who will do the same, a couple of people you care about.
That's right, and without any religious bias or closed circuit in the mind. It's for everybody, every religion, every group.
No
strings attached, no organizational obligations or anything
None
like
whatever.
that. I believe it's a wonderful concept, and John, I just pray, and I know many more people will join you in prayer for the perfect fulfillment, because it is a true fact in the entire history of the world that every great movement is always first initiated by the visionary, by someone who steps out ahead of the general level of public opinion and really believes in something and stands fast and goes through all the difficulties and problems and stays with it until, in the end, it is the visionary who has opened up a new pathway in the field of the progression of mankind. So I want to assure you of the certainty of God's blessing upon any project like yours, which has to do with establishing the brotherhood of man in the fatherhood of God upon earth. Thank you for talking to me, John, and I hope this will be shared with many people.
Well, may I thank you, Brother Mandus, and add that as soon as this program is over, I hope that you who listen to it will stop and take a minute for peace. Begin doing this every day. Join this growing network of peace that is helping to create the conditions that will bring it to pass.
Thank you, and thank you, Father. Peace on earth, goodwill toward all men.
That concludes side 1 of this tape. Please run it on to the end, turn it over, and join us again for side 2 with Brother Mandus and John McConnell at the United Nations Chapel in New York. Thank you for listening.
John, it's so good to have this privilege of talking to you, and you are so full of stories about these amazing adventures that you've been passing through in connection with your Minute for Peace, all the people you talk to in the United Nations and the delegates you meet and the quite fantastic things that have happened. So I wonder if you just tell us now something about this Minute for Peace, how it came into being. This is John McConnell.
The idea of Minute for Peace is to get people all over the world, each in their own way, to take at least a minute to think about peace or pray for peace. And there is a growing network of people who are joining every day in thoughts of goodwill and peace. But to tell you about the peace bell, this is a bell that stands in front of the United Nations under a little Japanese pagoda. The history of it is that back when the country of Japan was not yet a member of the United Nations, the observer at the United Nations felt that there should be a peace bell at the United Nations, and in a meeting of all of the different UN associations from around the world, he proposed this and then collected pennies and coins from the children and from the people that were attending this meeting. And pennies and coins from the children of over 60 different countries went into the casting of this bronze bell. The bell stands under this Japanese pagoda, and whenever you visit the United Nations, the tour, it's pointed out. But one day I was standing nearby. We were taking some pictures, and I accidentally touched the striker that hits the bell, and honestly, the tone was so beautiful, it just sent a chill up and down my spine.
Well,
and I thought, we should make use of this. The people should hear the sound of the peace bell. More than any other bell in the world, this bell symbolizes world peace. It was actually made from the coins and materials that came from people from all over the world, and then it was set in front of the United Nations, which represents almost all the countries of the world, and practically no use has been made of it. It's not been officially rung until it was rung for Minute for Peace. And this in itself is another story.
Tell me about that. Is this where the children came in?
Yes, what happened was that I was recording children at the United Nations school with their thoughts on peace, and we had 7 one-minute spots with simple thoughts on peace that were distributed by UNICEF. These went all over the world, and I spoke to officials at the United Nations about using the sound of the peace bell for our Minute for Peace. I obtained special permission from the Secretary General to record the bell. And then we spoke about having the children ring it. And the Secretary General who thought arranged for 7 of the children from the United Nations school to ring the bell ceremonially. It was in a very simple ceremony on October 4th. He chose the day, incidentally, which was the anniversary of the Pope's visit to the United Nations. And we had Monsignor Giovannetti, who represented the Pope, and we had the ambassador from Japan, Ambassador Matsui, and a few other people, Mr. Narasimhan, the Undersecretary at the United Nations. And then we had 7 children line up and take hold of the striker, and they joined in ringing the peace bell in a simple ceremony. And now in our Minute for Peace recordings, we hear the sound of this bell, and we hope that wherever it's heard, it will bring to people thoughts of goodwill and peace.
That's a very interesting story, isn't it? This United Nations school, can you tell us something about that?
The United Nations International School is a school for the children of the delegates and employees of the United Nations. They have children from every country. I remember when I was recording there, we had children from the Soviet Union and from Israel and from Arab countries and from, all over the world. And I think one of the warmest things that were said there, I wish it could be repeated over and over again all over the world. A little Arab boy said, "We here at the United Nations School feel we are a family." And you knew he meant it. And if we, the people of the world on this little planet of ours, can all feel that we are one great big family, I think many of our problems will be overcome.
You know, this is a very profound thing. I had never heard of this United Nations school, and probably millions of other people have never heard of it. But isn't it an amazing thing that right there at the heart of the United Nations, where of course there are hundreds of delegates living in New York, partaking in the debates and discussions, of course they have families, like everybody on earth have families. And of course here are their children, speaking all the languages of earth, all gathered here in New York. And this concept of having a school whereby these children come together, it's marvelous, because, as your little Arab boy said, we are like a family. Well, we are, all of us, like a family. And here is, as it were, the embryo of the world to be, living in fellowship with one another in the little children of the very delegates from all the nations of earth. You know, a child shall lead them is a very wonderful statement. Tell me, how do they manage about language in the teaching?
Well, the teaching there is done in English, and they, of course, the children are, from the smaller grades, they're interested in learning English while they're here in the United States.
Yes.
And I don't know just how they deal with some of the language problems, but they do have children from all the different countries there. In fact, I want to say, Brother Mandus, in the days that I spent recording in this school, I was so inspired with hope for the future, because when these children grow up, I think they will know how to build a world of peace without the conflict and violence that we have today. In fact, I wish that we could have in every country special schools where people of all countries would come together, as they do at the United Nations, to implant in their minds these feelings of being one great family. Now, when these boys and girls grow up, the relationships between people of different countries will be different.
Yes, because they begin to understand that the differences are only superficial anyway, and they learn to live with one another and bring out the best in each other. Children, of course, the world over never find any difficulty in racial relationships at all. And so this, too, is a good lesson to we people who grow up into adult life and get caught up in all the differences between races and peoples and religions and so forth. How many children would there be there in the school, do you estimate?
I'm not sure, but I imagine, I'm just making a guess here, I think there must be 400 or 500 children.
Well, that's a wonderful thing. Well, I'll tell you what I think we ought to do, John. I'm going to use this recording you have of the peace bell, and we'll have it struck right now, and the friends who will be listening to this recording, I'm going to invite you, and I'm talking to you, whoever listens to this recording. As we strike this peace bell, we're going to enter into a minute for peace. We're going to be with the Father and look above and beyond all the trifling differences of ideology or theology and just know the simplicity of the will of God for the world, the will of God that this day people shall find fellowship and peace and harmony and compassion and tolerance one for the other. Let this be our minute for the peace of the world. Here is the bell, and when it strikes a second time, we will have spent 1 minute with God.